The Paranormal Podcast is brought to you by Gaia, the streaming TV service dedicated to exploring the cutting edge of metaphysics, ancient wisdom, and the unexplained. 5,000 years of wisdom on demand. Get your first month for only 99 cents. Visit Gaia.com/Jim. That's Gaia.com/Jim to see what's happening on the largest consciousness media streaming platform in the world. Thanks, Gaia.
This is the Paranormal Podcast with Jim Harold.
Welcome to the Paranormal Podcast. I'm Jim Harold. Happy holidays to everybody out there. And we're so glad that you decided to take some time from this busy season and tune in and spend with us. And we've got a good show for you today. First up will be John B. Alexander, PhD. He's going to talk to us about reality denied, firsthand experiences with the things that can't happen but did. And looking forward to that conversation with John. Then we have Cyndi Dale on board. She is going to talk to us all about chakras. And before we get started, I have a huge favor to ask. If you are on an Apple device, an iPod or an iPad, and this is for every single person, I'm going to ask you to do this. Make sure you go into your podcasts app today. And if you enjoy this program, I want you to hit subscribe. You go into your podcasts app that's right on your Apple phone or on your Apple iPad, and you find the Paranormal Podcast, and please hit subscribe. It helps us immensely, and I would certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much, and here is the Paranormal Podcast. Now, on the programs, we really look at a wide range of phenomena, and it just seems like there are a lot of things going on that, you know, if you look at things from a materialistic point of view, they don't really make sense, but yet there they are, and they seem to happen. And that's kind of the subject of a new book out by a repeat guest, and it looks absolutely fascinating. It's called Reality Denied, Firsthand Experiences with Things That Can't Happen but did. And our guest is Colonel John B. Alexander, actually John B. Alexander, PhD, and he has a fantastic and very varied background. He's a retired senior Army officer with decades of experience with a wide range of phenomena. He has traveled to all 8 continents exploring these events that defy common explanation. A founding member of the board of IRVA. He's a past president of IANDS and former SSE counselor. He straddles 2 worlds, and he's also retired from the Los Alamos National Laboratory and served on the National Research Council, the Army Science Board, the Council on Foreign Relations, NATO, and was a senior fellow of Department of Defense University. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross headed his doctoral committee. And his website is at johnbalexander.com, where you can explore all those mysteries. But today we're going to talk about his new book, Reality Denied. Colonel Alexander, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Oh, who is that guy you're talking about?
Wow, you did a lot. I was tongue twisted. It was. There's a lot there. But I do have to ask about that, and I think we may have talked about this before when you were on the program. But it's been a while, and I'm sure we've got some new people along. When you think of a highly accomplished military officer such as yourself, you think of just kind of like think of that old show Dragnet and Jack Webb, just the facts, man. Very kind of brass tacks. Just show me the facts. Where are the facts? And yet you are so involved in these other realms and these other things. How did that happen for you?
Well, I'm not sure how to address that one. I think I ask myself that all the time. People ask if I had some epiphany event. The answer is no. Trip has been more like turning a cruise liner or an aircraft carrier, sort of subtle changes, and things sort of always appear.
Now,
I would say, though, in fairness to the military, and in many of the phenomena that we'll discuss, remember U.S. alone, we're talking millions of people in the government, and I'm sure in the UK you have, similar numbers. And what we know is that for UFOs, for instance, probably 10% of that population, i.e., people in the government, have actually seen UFOs. We know that a much higher percentage have had other psychic phenomena. So it's not uncommon for people to, bring these things from their, personal experiences with them to the job.
Now, you have a forward here by a fascinating person who's also been on the programs, Uri Geller. And what an interesting guy who also apparently has served his country in certain capacities. Fascinating person. And that had to be quite a thrill to have him write the foreword for this book.
Yes, well, I've known Uri for decades and corresponded frequently, and I've frankly seen him do some very remarkable things we might want to get into, but there's one that I addressed, in the metal bending one that happened in the U.S. Capitol itself. If you'd like to hear about that.
Sure, tell us about it.
Yeah, what had happened was this is still the bad old days, meaning Soviet Union is still in play. And he had come to Washington and what he wanted to talk about was the plight of Soviet Jews. They couldn't get out of the Soviet Union very well, some immigrating to Israel. But he wanted to talk about that issue, and we had a number of senators and congressmen, and a lot of staffers were present. And this was in a special unit that's guarded. So everybody said, bend something. And he goes, well, I haven't got anything to bend. And so they went out and literally took the spoon out of a guard's coffee cup, which is significant because it means there's no way that, there was any preparation done to the spoon. And so he brought it in and held it by the bowl and brought one finger down from the top, did not grab the neck of the spoon at all. And as we watched, the spoon handle bent up. He then laid it aside. He had a chair next to him. It was sitting on the top of the chair where it continued to bend. And then somehow fell on the floor and ended up in my pocket. So still have that one.
That's a good one to have. Now, in the beginning of the book here, you have a number of personal experiences, everything from UFOs to... Now, this is an interesting one to me. I think of that old movie, Day of the Dolphins. Speak to me, dolphins and whales. Did you have a personal experience with communication with animals?
Oh, yes. In fact, there's a whole chapter on interspecies communications, and we talked about 3 species, one of which we don't recommend and didn't get much response from, and that was diving with great white sharks. But the dolphin experiments, we were dealing with animals in the wild, in the Bahamas, and describe in there how, the part of the experiment was telepathic communication, requesting that they do certain things, which, they did respond to. Scott Jones later did another experiment called Neptune's Helper, but that was with dolphins in captivity. And again, telepathic communication for terribly complex sets of instructions, which the dolphins followed.
And that's interesting.
Also,
Go ahead.
More recently, we're in Tonga, which is out in the South Pacific. It's a very big country with only about 2% of the territory that's actually has land. The rest of it's just ocean. But diving with humpback whales, one of the few areas where you can actually get in the water with them. And we had interaction that ranges up to inches. They knew exactly where we were. I do like to say that obviously the whales don't hold a grudge because human interaction with whales has not been too good for them over the centuries.
Well, one thing's interesting to me. You mentioned it there, telepathy. So this communication's not necessarily audible, but this was mental communication, telepathic communication.
Right.
And that's fascinating to me. And that gets into the question of, I mean, I think some people think this stuff is woo-woo and it's out there. But the government for years and years has done research on telepathic communication, remote viewing, and things like that, haven't they?
Well, yeah, I do cover one on Psychic Spies, the remote viewing program. And, you know, I was assigned in the Pentagon for a while. I kept running around trying to find this guy Pentagon, who said the Pentagon says this and the Pentagon says that. Pentagon doesn't say anything. It's a big stone building, okay? So the point is there are people in the Pentagon who are interested in these topics and sometimes explore them. I'd point out that the remote viewing program spent about $20 million and over 20 years. So, from, again, the Department of Defense perspective, we're not even talking lunch money.
Right. Yeah, because you're talking about huge bombers and huge missiles and huge pieces of equipment. But the fact that they did anything, it seems to me that when these type of things are characterized in popular media, there's an attempt to make a joke of it. The men of hysteric goats and that kind of thing. But it wasn't considered a joke at the time, was it?
Yeah. John Ronson is your guy. Is the one who wrote Goats. I might digress there. I was able to identify quite a few people. In the book itself, there's no doubt who we are because he used our real names. And my point was that he took a small amount of truth and wrote, maybe 10 times that amount, and then they made the movies. So you can imagine what the accuracy might be.
Another thing here, and that's what I love about this book. It's got a lot of different topics, and later on I'm going to ask you if you think they're all connected. But before we get to that question, one here that we've done shows on, not a lot of shows, but one that's always mysterious to me is this idea of crystal skulls. And you had your own experience with the crystal skulls?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, there are a lot of crystal skulls. The one that I was exposed to, I've seen several, but the infamous Mitchell Hedges skull, which is probably one of the best known and unique in that the mandible is detachable as opposed to just a solid thing, and it has supraorbital ridges and a place for the optic nerves to go in. Having said all that, the story was that Anna, as a young girl, had found this in what was then British Honduras, now Belize, and had brought it out. Everybody thought at the time at best that her father had found it and planted it. But more recent research tends to indicate that this is much newer. And probably fabricated in the U.S. with some pretty good polishing machines. But, and the point in the story is that I had a mystical experience with it that, be it real or not, the experience was totally real.
Yeah, that's interesting. The thought that perhaps some of these skulls have these kind of mystical abilities and type things. Now, I mean, do you believe that these are all hoaxed, or do you think there may be something to some of these skulls?
Well, as I said, in my case, what happened was that I was invited out to what was, Kitchener is where Anna lived at that time. She has since transitioned, but in Canada. And we went to the location. There was a medium there, and a lot of background. They were providing messages, via the medium, mostly New Age kind of woo-woo stuff, as you might say. And then they asked if we'd like healing. And we did several of those. There was only a few people. There was probably 6 of us total. And so they asked if I'd like one, and I go like, oh, what the hell? I wasn't ill or anything, but I would stand there. And there was a well-known producer with me, and he was the guy who had set the whole thing up. And so he's standing immediately behind me. And you may have participated in these trust exercises where they ask people, you fall back
Sure.
and the people catch you and that. But the point is that it's really easy to catch somebody when you know they're going to fall. You have your hands just a couple of inches away. But, I sort of felt a wavering. I said, I'll just stay with this. And the next thing I knew, I was on top of this guy who was prepared to catch me. I had physically knocked him over, and we both ended up on a couch behind there. And he's going, Alexander, get off me. I didn't know you weighed so much. And I don't. But the point is, what was the energy that took place that allowed me to literally knock him over? And I have no conscious recollection of how that happened. I just knew that all of a sudden, there we were on top, with me on top of him.
We're talking with John B. Alexander today. The subject is his book, Reality Denied, and we'll be back right after this on the Paranormal Podcast. The Paranormal Podcast is brought to you by Gaia, the streaming TV service dedicated to exploring the cutting edge of metaphysics, ancient wisdom, and the unexplained. And I want to know, have you been a good boy or girl this year? Well, I think you deserve the gift of Gaia, and it's the kind of gift that you can give yourself very inexpensively. You can actually get your first month for only 99 cents. Now, this time of the year, everybody's out there shopping for new devices, maybe phones, maybe tablets, maybe things like Roku or Apple TV that you can connect to your television and get streaming services. And when you get those great devices, you need something to fill them up with. Well, why not fill up your device, whether it's a phone, a tablet, a TV streaming device, whatever it is, with the gift of Gaia? The first month is only 99 cents. It is really fantastic because before Gaia, there wasn't a streaming service dedicated to the topics we love, but now there is. Now, I talked about various devices, and Gaia is on pretty much all of them. Apple TV, Roku, iPhone, iPad, Chromecast, Android device, Fire TV, your computer. If you're listening to this podcast, you can watch Gaia. And there's so much video on the internet, but it's a mixed bag. Oh my goodness, it is. You don't know where it comes from. You don't know who created it. The audio quality is typically not good. The video quality is typically not good on a lot of those big sites where it's kind of user-generated content. But the good news is with Gaia, it's quality. It's all quality and all on the topics we love because they do two things. They curate, they go out and they find the best third-party content on these subjects that we love, and then they create content with some of the greatest minds. People like Eric Von Daniken and George Norrie, and the list goes on of the different people who are a part of Gaia. Gaia explores the topics we love, and they're always providing new content, always upping their game. This week is no exception. For example, this one really got my attention. Deep Space Season 2 this week. A secret base at Dulce with guests including Michael Sala, Daniel Sheehan, Mike Barra, Richard Dolan, Peter Lavenda, David Childress, and many more. That's on Deep Space Season 2, and something you can see if you're a member over at Gaia. Or maybe you want to see this. This looks like a really interesting one. Beyond Belief with George Norrie, Evidence of Nuclear War on Mars with John Brandenburg. Interesting stuff. I tell you, you're not going to find that anywhere else but Gaia. Gaia exclusive. So much great content. And now there's a page where you can check out some videos to get a flavor for it. They set up this page, Gaia.com/Jim. That's Gaia.com/Jim. And I've handpicked some shows there you can watch for absolutely free. Watch them. You'll see what I mean. some shows on UFOs, haunted places, and Bigfoot, to name some topics. And once you see, you are going to want to be a part of it for only 99 cents. There's a little button that says sign up. Click on it and get your first month for only 99 cents. Now, I will tell you this. I want you to do it mainly because you're going to enjoy it. If you enjoy this show, you're going to enjoy Gaia. But I also want you to do it because they have really supported us in what we do here. So show them some love and say, hey, it's the end of the year. We're kind of reflecting on the last year, and we appreciate you helping Jim out. Give them a try. You're really going to like it. Go to Gaia.com/Jim. That's GAIA.com/Jim to see what's happening on the largest consciousness media streaming platform in the world. Thanks, Gaia. Our guest today is John B. Alexander, and he is our guest, and the book is Reality Denied. I will get to this point, and we'll talk about some of the other individual things that have happened in the past. But do you think it's a case where, I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, I was a kid in the 70s, so that gives you an idea of my age. And there was this great show called In Search Of, which I loved, and I think actually kind of inspired me to read about all these things and eventually end up doing what I do now, even though it didn't exist back then in terms of podcasting and all of this. But regardless, they would say we'll explore the mysteries of UFOs and Bigfoot and mysterious disappearances, and they listed out all these different categories. And I always looked at all of these things as very siloed, kind of UFOs over here, ghosts over there, strange cryptid creatures in yet another category, that they weren't really related. But over the years, I've talked to a number of people who think that they are very much related. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's a slide that I use in all of my presentations that has pictures of all of the things you just mentioned and a lot more. Near-death studies, remote viewing, firewalking, cryptozoology, postmortem communication, etc. And as I look at it, I think the idea of stovepiping, i.e. looking at them in isolation, is a terrible mistake. I do think they are interrelated, and I do think that human consciousness is probably a integral piece of that. And I'll take a simple one. You mentioned UFOs. I did write, another book on that topic as well. But the point was, I begin by saying, what do you mean? In that, if you have a UFOs, they got little balls of light that go around. We've got a, huge craft, more than a mile, even 2 miles across, with lots of witnesses, hard radar sightings in cases, etc., and thousands of iterations in between. And it's this variance, to me, that's problematic. So when you say I'm going to study UFOs, you start with, you can't even define that topic, let alone put it in the other. And you do find, again, that consciousness appears to be a piece when you look at these things, particularly from a historical perspective. You see that there's some kind of other interaction going on, and I don't think we're going to find any simple question. I happen to reject the notion of, I come down against the ETH, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, not because the incidents don't happen, but primarily because it's just too simple. It does not explain all of the observations.
Is there a trickster element to this? Because some people feel the more they look into it, it's almost like they're being toyed with to some extent, whether it's ghosts or UFOs or whatever it might be. Or is this far more benevolent, or is it like life is a little bit of both?
I can't answer all of that, except that the trickster, what I termed was the precognitive sentient phenomenon, which is very much akin to the trickster. And my understanding of that came from our experiences with Skinwalker Ranch. You're probably familiar with the ranch. And
Sure.
many really, really strange things absolutely happened. And this is a place that was instrumented. And the point was that something would happen. We would design protocols to study it. We had cameras out there that were staring 24/7, and things would happen right in front of the camera and not appear. Or what I've seen in many investigations are, you're looking in one area, and whatever happens just off screen. And, when I called it precognitive, I said that whatever it is, and it's a superpower of some kind, if you will, but it is in charge. And that consciousness knows how you are going to respond to whatever is presented to you before the presentation takes place. And cognitive, it is sentient, it is certainly smart, whatever it is, and covers this wide range of phenomena.
That's interesting. It knows what you're going to do before you do it. That's very, very interesting.
Well, that is, and I've seen that in several investigations. And it's always, the things, it's not what you're expecting, and it goes, okay, you like that? Try this, and gives you something quite different from, the last one. Then you try to study that, and about the time you do that, yet something else appears.
The ultimate question, I think most people, if you said you've got one big question you can have answered, there might be two or three different ones that would probably combat for the lead. But I think in the heart of hearts, most people want to know what happens after you die. And I know you talk about, you have chapter 15 here on being dead. And I mean, in many ways, that's the ultimate mystery. They're the old spiritual, the lonesome valley. You're going to walk that valley. You're going to walk it by yourself. Nobody here can walk it for you. You're going to walk it by yourself. But we do have glimpses through things like NDEs. What are your thoughts on being dead?
Well, as I have pointed out, if you want a topic that should attract a lot of interest and serious research, it is, continuation of consciousness beyond physical death. And the reason is, as you were just pointing out, 100% of us are going to encounter that. So ought to be of high interest. There's a lot of reasons why certain things don't happen. But you have a range of phenomena that certainly point to some form of continuation. Near-death studies is one. The issue there generally is that we're talking to somebody who's alive. Yeah, they probably should have been dead, and many of them will say that they had crossed the veil. But nonetheless, sometimes death is just considered irreversible. Have said that there are spectacular cases. Eben Alexander, who's no relative, whatever, and the Proof of Heaven comes to mind. He's done several books.
He's been on the show.
What was unique about Eben, of course, was this guy's a neurosurgeon who understands the brain, and what he survived is virtually unsurvivable, and yet other mystical things happen when they're out. Mary Neal, who was another medical doctor, is just a phenomenal case. In her case, she was upside down underwater for at least 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. And no, there's no pockets of water or pockets of air, rather, under the water where she was, and rushing water, and a series of miracles happened. But the number of people reporting near-death experiences, and I might digress into that. I was actually the president of the International Association for Near-Death Studies at one point, and entered thousands and thousands of these cases, but there are literally millions, and they come back and consistently tell very interesting stories from, being out of their body or autoscopic position, all the way up to meeting deceased relatives. Interesting cases where they meet people on, quote, the other side, whom they did not know were dead, in some cases did not know had existed. I'd say the evidence for just using near-death experiences alone is very good. You've also got postmortem communications, and we can talk about that if you're interested as well. But
oh yes, please do.
That's a historically British one. You've got many mediums who, for probably a couple centuries at least, have been presenting tales or interactions with deceased entities. The most striking one, in my case, from my perspective, was a study that was done by the University of Sao Paulo. There was a very famous medium in Brazil, Chico Xavier, and I would encourage people to look him up on the internet. There's actually an excellent movie about this guy and his life. He transitioned a number of years ago, but he was so famous that he was on television. So what's unique there is you can actually have films of some of the work that he did. And Chico wrote, well, I hate to say write, he used the term psychographs. In other words, he was transmitting information on about 450 different books, all of which were ascribed to discarnate entities, many of whom were known. And what the university study did was they took a series of letters from one of those individuals whom they did have background information on, and that had been dictated by Chico. And in studying them, and then they compared that with information from that individual that was, when he had been alive. And they found that 98% of the facts were, in fact true, and the remaining 2% just could not be verified. But that's pretty dramatic evidence of some form of communication.
Going back to the near-death experience, the funny thing is that I was just interviewing not that long ago a skeptic, and I brought up near-death experiences, and he said something to the effect of, well, there people who are in the quote vomit comet have similar experiences, but it's not the same. And the thing is that people with near-death experiences, for example, will report seeing medical personnel doing various things to them that they would have no way of knowing. And they come back and describe these things. Is there just something now again, I don't think it's a sin to be skeptical. I think we should be skeptical about some things, and we should take every case on its merits. We shouldn't accept everything on blind faith. But when this kind of evidence is staring people in the face and they just said, well, that's an anomaly. Let's move on to the next case. I mean, is there something inherent in the human psychic that we have to be overly skeptical? Or what are your thoughts on skeptics and things like their disbelief of things like NDEs?
Well, let's distinguish the difference between skepticism and debunking. The simple, it can't be, therefore it isn't, as opposed to, wow, I wonder how that happened. And you're definitely right. The skepticism and healthy skepticism is pretty good. And some of the areas we're talking about one of my red flags, particularly if you're talking postmortem communication, is that anytime money, and particularly big money, starts to get involved, I recommend you run away as quickly as possible because there are frauds.
Sure.
Unfortunately, the same is true in certain medical healings as well, but not all. So being skeptical is reasonable, but challenging, and when the facts become overwhelming, as Dean Radin, a friend of mine, said, if psi were a crime, it would be convicted. Any jury would come back and say, absolutely real. You also touched on a bigger issue, and that has to do with fundamental belief systems. The interview you just gave said, look, if these, any or all of the kinds of phenomena we've described are real, then that can be an affront to one's, existing belief system, and that's pretty scary. I tell a story of an engineer who I had taken out when Cleve Baxter, a guy who did a lot of work with plants, and I was doing work with oral leukocytes. There's a whole chapter called White Cells Matter in the book. And remotely monitoring the emotional state of the donor. And so I had Cleve under contract, and we went out, and I wanted to build his device. And I took this engineer from Night Vision Lab out, and I said, okay, can you build this? And he says, well, yeah, it's pretty straightforward, but there's a piece missing. The piece, of course, was how does the information get from the donor, to the white cells? And what he told me, and I'll give him credit in that he went ahead, and he said, look, I have cut a certain segment out of the universe for me, and you can move things about inside that. But don't tell me I have to relearn physics because I don't want to hear it. In other words, his belief system was kind of shaken. I gave him credit because he could have screwed me very easily if just left, something unattached, or any number of simple connections could have been assigned. But he didn't, and it works quite well. But I think what he was saying applies to a lot of people with a materialistic belief system. I just don't want to hear something different.
And I think that, you talk about religious dogma, but I think you can have a dogma that is decidedly not religious. A dogma that says, this, just as you said, this is what I believe. Don't confuse me with your supposed facts. And we see that throughout history. The example I use is DNA. I mean, we didn't know about DNA in 1900. Now, that didn't mean that it existed any less. It existed. It was there, but we didn't have the techniques, the technology, the knowledge to discover it. And lo and behold, decades later, the knowledge came, and now we know very much about it and map the genome and all of these different things. Similarly, many of the things that you deal with in your book, maybe there is a, quote, scientific explanation that we've just not reached yet.
When I did my doctoral dissertation, Kubler-Ross, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was the head of my committee, a very famous doctor who brought hospice to the U.S., and with Raymond Moody was also key in defining the whole concept of near-death experience. Elizabeth made me change one word, and that was from religiousness to spirituality. And that turned out to be really central to the findings of the study. I was measuring changes in spirituality in people who had attended a life, death, and transition workshop and had been, for the most part, many of them the first time ever exposed to some of these topics. But it was amazing how many people crossed out religious or said, I reject what you call the dogma of the church, but I believe I have, connections with higher entities or spiritual world and that. Now, one of the things that I think that happens in the West, and we can talk about Brazil because I use this as an interesting state, but throughout most of the world, they acknowledge the existence of a spiritual world or multiple, spiritual dimensions that are beyond, the physical world or consensus reality as we deal with it here. And I think that's really key. And again, if you have a belief system that's strictly material, and as you know, we have the Large Hadron Collider, for instance. We spent $18 billion so far on that, looking for the God particle. And it was interesting because they, a couple of years ago, said, okay, we found the Higgs boson, and said this is the fundamental piece. And then a short time later, they said, oops, nope, there's pentaquarks. This gets to your issue of, did we know about it? These things were always there. And a lot of studies. And so you're dealing with, are you going to accept, multidimensional realities, or are you stuck in one? And how you respond to that is going to dictate quite a bit on, how you'll respond to these various phenomena.
Well, today we've only scratched the surface of reality denied. There's many, many topics that we haven't talked about here. Firewalking, poltergeist, psi and the martial arts, journeys out of body, mediums. There's many, many things we haven't talked about. Voodoo. And I guess that the key is here, if people want to learn more, that they need to pick up the book Reality Denied, Firsthand Experiences with Things That Can't Happen But Did. So, Colonel Alexander, where can people find the book? Amazon
and several others. I think a Google search will bring it up. That's probably the best way to get it, or my website. And rather than give it out, just if you Google my name, John B. Alexander, you'll go to my website, and there's links from that. You'll also get a lot of background information there on the many of the topics that we talked about, and my trips to all 8 continents, and some of these explorations we've had, and you can see why I come to some of the conclusions that I do.
And do you think that you've come closer to an explanation for all of this? Or do you think that it's, some things are just going to be unknowable, just knowing that something's going on is enough? Or do you think that you have some explanations for some of these different phenomena?
Well, you've just opened up a whole new kettle. There is something I've talked about. I call it Alexander's Law of Appropriate Complexity. And briefly, what that says is everybody is faced with certain things that they don't understand, and that and this applies across the entire spectrum of life. But the point is that as you get to where the point you say, I've got it all figured out, all of a sudden a whole new order of complexity emerges, and you find you're back at the starting point for the next level. Almost like a computer game, if you will.
Very interesting. Well, our guest today has been John B. Alexander, Ph.D. His new book is Reality Denied, Firsthand Experiences with Things That Can't Happen But Did. Thank you for joining us today. A great discussion with John, and we always appreciate when he comes on the program. A very interesting guy. And next up, we have another interesting person. Cyndi Dale will join us to talk about chakras. Right after this. Hey, I wanted to tell you about 2 things that I think that you might enjoy this time of year. One is a gift possibly for somebody else, or the other is a gift for yourself. And I'm talking about my Campfire books and my Paranormal Plus Club. Now let's start with the books. If you're new to these parts, you may not even know that I have 5 Campfire books out compiled from the best stories that we've ever had on the show. Each one has been a Kindle Supernatural bestseller, and I hope that you'll check them out. Now you can get them in ebook on a Kindle. You don't even need a Kindle anymore to read a Kindle book. You just need a smartphone app to do that, the free Kindle app. Or if you're old school and like the Dead Tree version, you can check out my actual physical books. Now, how do I do this? Now, you can always go to Amazon and search directly for Jim Harold's Campfire, or you can make it easy and just go to jimharoldbooks.com. That's jimharoldbooks.com. Harold, by the way. And that'll take you to a page on my website where you have all the handy-dandy links there for both the US and the UK. So I hope that you will check it out. I think it's a great gift if you know somebody who loves the spooky, but they've not really ever tuned into a podcast. This is a way to share the Campfire love. That's at jimharoldbooks.com or on Amazon. Also, we have an adult Campfire coloring book you may not be familiar with, and you can check that out in those same places as well. It's a lot of fun. Secondly, I wanted to mention something that might be a good gift for yourself. If you're listening to the Campfire, you know that there are many, many more episodes of the Campfire that are not available on the free feed. And you may say, Jim, how can I access all of these classic Campfires? Well, there's one way to do it, and that's the ability to be a part of my Paranormal Plus Club. Now, we did a major upgrade this year. We have our Spooky Studio app, and now you can easily consume the content, which before it was I had to log in and do all these different things. Now you can listen right on our smartphone app. Now, what do you get if you are a member of my Paranormal Plus Club? Now, keep in mind, we're always adding new stuff, but as of December 1st, here's what you get. You get access to 314 episodes of the Campfire that are no longer available on the free feed. So you can go all the way back to 2009 and listen to all that stuff. Then you get access to 494 episodes of the Paranormal Podcast going all the way back to 2005. That you can't listen to now, okay? Then you get access, you can't listen to on the free side, I should say. I'm kind of vamping the spot, so Crime Scene. Okay, that is now a free podcast, but only the most recent ones. So you can go back and listen to 120 episodes of that you can't listen for free at this point. Now, but wait, there's more, as they say. Ghost Insight. 83 episodes, plus only, have never been free. UFO Encounters, 125 episodes, plus only, have never been free. The Other Side, the Metaphysical Podcast, 178 episodes that have never been free. Conspiracy Corner, 108 episodes that have never been free. We just did a great one on the JFK situation yesterday, just released it. Ancient Mysteries on the Air. We talk about ancient astronauts and the Great Pyramids and all of that. 34 episodes. And then the Cryptid Report, 13 episodes. That's our newest exclusive Paranormal Plus podcast. Then what else do you get? Well, we have an archive of interactive plus webinars, 30 plus hours of on-demand content that you can watch from the app. Plus, we have more live events coming in 2018. We're actually in discussions with our first speaker of the year, so we're going to have more of those coming up. Now, what have people said that they joined this new Plus Club? Stuart said, adore the new app, much more convenient to listen to Plus shows on road trips. Lisa said, I can't even begin to tell you how much I love your new app. As a Plus Club member, it's like Christmas to have all of this content. And then Alejandra said, it is so easy to navigate and look for what you want to listen. Love the new app, Jim. It has sure made my experience much more enjoyable in regard to the Plus Club. So we are so thankful. We hope you'll check it out this holiday season as a gift to yourself for 2018. It's at jimharoldplus.com, jimharoldplus.com. And how do you access it? You just click on the blue banner at jimharoldplus.com, and they'll show you how you can sign up for either a month or a year. So I hope that you will check it out. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you'll check out the books and my Paranormal Plus Club. Happy holidays. Now, when we talk about the metaphysical, many times the subject that comes up is that of chakras. But I'm convinced that maybe some of us hear this and we really don't know what it's all about. And we have the perfect person on the line today to tell us what it's all about. I'm talking about Cyndi Dale, and she has a recent book out called Llewellyn's Little Book of Chakras. And she is an internationally renowned author, speaker, healer, and business consultant. She is president of Life Systems Services, through which she has conducted over 35,000 client sessions and presented training classes throughout Europe, Asia, and the Americas. And we're so glad to have her on the program to talk all about chakras. Cyndi, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jim. I'm really glad to be here. And I love talking about chakras. I think I've written almost 25 books about subjects, if not chakras, similar to chakras. So I tend to be the chakra queen, I think.
I like that. I like that. You should, I don't know if you use that. You should say she's considered the chakra queen. I really like that. Well,
I should. People will worship me then, right?
There you go. There you go. Well, now, so let's just start at a very base level. What are chakras?
Excellent. Well, in order to explain chakras, I need to really briefly define energy, because everything's made out of energy. So energy is just simply information that moves. You know, it's information that tells your coffee to be coffee versus tea, that tells your dog to wag its tail or not. But there's two types of energy. There's energy that's more physically measurable. And, you know, that's what's in your coffee cup. Hopefully it's not empty. And there's energy that is called subtle or psychic or spiritual energy, and that's just simply less measurable. It's sort of the invisible stuff of the universe. So the organs in your body really explain how physical energy works, and physical energy manages your physical organs. But the subtle organs of the body, of which chakras are the main type, are the organs. They work just like your physical organs, but they're invisible or harder to measure, are the organs, the centers that are managing your subtle energies. And Jim, I think at least 90% of reality is actually composed of this subtle or psychic energy. So most of what's happening in your body, in your life, in your thoughts, in your feelings, in your relationships is really being managed by the chakras or the subtle energy managers.
Can you briefly take us through the chakras?
I absolutely can. Most people work with a 7-chakra system. These are the chakras that are located in the body. What's super cool about working with those 7 main ones is because they ground or anchor into the physical body, when you interact with them, they can manage a physical issue as well as a psychological and a spiritual. So you have the first chakra in the hips. It's usually seen as red. That describes what it's doing. It's survival-oriented. Your second chakra is in your abdomen. It's considered orange. It's really all about feelings. I could sing the Barry Manilow song, but some people may not even recognize it anymore.
I know what you're talking about.
I do too. There's the third chakra. That's in your solar plexus. It's yellow, and it manages mentality. Your heart chakra, your fourth chakra, it's green. It's in your heart. It's all about love. There's probably some good songs about that too that we're going to spare the listeners. There's your fifth chakra. It's blue. It's in the throat area. That's all about communication, both speaking, you know, how we hear and speak audibly, but also what we're bringing in really from the invisible realm, from the guides. The sixth chakra's in the brow. It's purple. It's considered the seat of vision, but also clairvoyance or seeing psychic pictures. And then the seventh chakra's on the top of the head. It's white. It's the spiritual center. And those are the main 7 in-body chakras. Any number of systems have more chakras than those, so do I. But these are the ones that are really the most interactive, and the ones that if you interact with them can produce the most change in your life, positive change as well.
How do you begin to work with something like this? Let's say you're a neophyte and this is something that you've not really gotten into, but you've heard of it and you said, well, I'm interested, and obviously pick up the book. That's one big help, I'm sure. But how do you begin to access this? Because it might be a little intimidating for some people.
Oh, it can be intimidating and overwhelming. And in order to write some of my books, I did a lot of research on Tibetan and Hindu and Mayan systems. And just, my brain got catatonic. There's so much information. I, even personally and professionally, keep it really simple. I think all you really have to do is learn where the chakras are, one or two code words for each chakra, and and the colors. Colors are very helpful. And then when there's something going on in your life, if something's happening physically that you'd like some insight about, or you'd like to be physically stronger, or you would, like to not pick up on other people's physical sensations or illnesses or problems, then you just focus on the correlated chakra, which is the first one. If you have emotional considerations, well, that's a code word for the second chakra. So you can just bring your focus to the body area in which the chakra is anchored. Take a few deep breaths. Ask your inner spirit, ask the greater spirit to help you perceive what's happening in there, if there's a different decision that you need to make. And you can always just picture the color of the chakra, and just watch it in your head going through that energy center, through that part of the body. It'll clean, it'll relieve, it'll rebalance you. So those are some really easy practices that you can do in a moment. I always tell people, just learn the basics, and you've really got enough to integrate it into your everyday life.
Now, in the book, you talk about locating a chakra with a pendulum. Now, talk to us about pendulum work and how it plays into the idea of chakras.
Absolutely. This is really fun. Every time I teach a class, I take out a pendulum, which is like a necklace or a cord with a weight on it. As long as it can spin and you can hold the weight by a cord, you've got a pendulum. And, chakras are electromagnetic. They're composed of sound, they're composed of light or electromagnetic activity, and they spin in the front and the back side of the body. So because they're made out of light and sound, it means when you hold a weight in the field of the chakra, like right over that chakra in the front side or the back side of the body, if that chakra is spinning and moving, which they always do, sometimes a little less than more, you're going to be able to pick up the energetics of the field, the vortex movement of the field with that weight on the string. So it's a great parlor game. Also, every time I teach this in a class, people are like, oh my gosh, this works. I can test somebody else's chakras. I can see that there are such a thing. And they go home and they try it on their spouses, their kids, their dogs. If the dog will sit still, dogs have chakras too, and you can see that there are chakras and what's going on. And, it can get sort of fun and complicated at the same time. If the chakra is really spinning wide, that weight's going to make a big arc. That chakra is healthy and open and balanced. If it's just teeny tiny, you're probably scared of something and it's reflected in what that chakra manages. And you may want to take a look at what's going on physically, emotionally, mentally, relationally, whatever chakra is sort of shut down. You can now go, oh, my heart chakra is just barely moving, or it's moving in a strange way. What's going on relationally for me? What am I nervous about? Or who's not really my favorite person I've been spending time with? We can all fill in those blanks. So pendulum is a fantastic tool. I know energy healers who use the pendulum or massage people who use the pendulum to see what's happening inside of their client that their client may not consciously be aware of.
So the pendulum can actually indicate a condition or a situation where there's a problem?
It can, at least situationally. So, for instance, in most people, when you're holding a pendulum and you're watching it going over a person, for most people, when it's going clockwise, that chakra is balanced. When it's going counterclockwise, that chakra might be imbalanced, but it might also just be releasing energy. So in my book, The Little Book of Chakras, I give some really quick and easy ways for people to figure out, which way, clockwise or counterclockwise, is healthy for the person, involves them releasing energy versus bringing in energy, to get a diagnostic to figure out what's going on. And what's fun too is you can even hold the pendulum and you ask questions of the person or of yourself if there's there's different ways to test yourself as well, and get a sense of, is this a food that's healthy for me? Do I want to go to this movie or that movie? And sometimes there's no answer, so because it doesn't really matter, right? Not everything is deep and serious. But you can even test up, oh gosh, am I getting a virus or a bacteria? Within reason. I recognize that, sometimes it's difficult to pose the question the right way or interpret the answer, but this process really can hone you in on what's happening. I have a son, he's my youngest son, he's 18 and he's a baseball player. We would often use a pendulum, to figure out what he needed to work on to increase his velocity, or if he should be eating that Twinkie, which was a no automatically, or fruit, with his dinner. So, he has this tool. Now he's at college. He doesn't really let on that he's, going to be making some decisions using his chakras and his pendulum. But it's a handy dandy little trick, to get some answers for yourself.
Now, in the book, you talk about clearing chakras. What does that mean to clear a chakra?
Well, clearing chakras recognizes that really frequently we have a backlog of toxic energy or unhelpful energy that we just want to be done with. It's sort of like cleaning your house. You really have to do it, right? Every so often, we have to get rid of the residue, the dust, what we've picked up. If you have kids, you've constantly got stuff dragged in that's not really suitable to keep in the house. And so that's what we're doing when we're clearing a chakra. Each chakra, kind of creates residual residue or toxicity just from thoughts that we're done with or feelings that we've had that we don't need to hang on to anymore. And I believe that we absorb or sponge other people's energies as well. Like the physical first chakra takes in other physical issues from other people or beings or environments or their houses. Our emotional chakra brings in other people's feelings just so we can figure out what's going on with them. So to clear or clean a chakra is to let go of all that energy that's just sort of drudged up. It's mucky. It's not needed anymore. And you can visualize a white light going through a chakra to do that. You can picture the bright, shiny color of that chakra and see it in your mind's eye going through the back side of the chakra, through the front side. That's a great way to dispense of energies that you no longer need. You can just tell your chakra, jettison, we're done. I'm finished with this energy. A lot of people really do pick up other people's energy. And I have a friend, for instance, every time she sees her parent, she just starts falling asleep because she's picking up falls asleep. And I said, why don't you, first of all, do a little better protection? You can open up your chakras, stream energies through them, and create a better energy field. That's the extension of the chakra that goes beyond your body. And I said, why don't you just see all the colors of each chakras before you walk in their house, going through your chakras back to forward, and just clean their energies out. So since she's been doing that, she's able to go in, she can chat, she can dine with them, she can do this and that, but she's not picking up their energy and then shutting down so she doesn't have to feel their pain or feel their feelings or think their thoughts. So we are very, very affected by other people's energy.
Now, one of the things that I think is kind of a modern epidemic is stress. We all seem like we're stressed out. Can the chakras provide any relief in that respect?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember there, statistics even from decades ago that 90%, 80% of most of our physical and psychological dysfunctions can just be reduced to stress. And typically people define stress as how you react to, or how you cope with events. But we have so many events, both seemingly negative and positive, that we're really asked to fire neurologically constantly. I mean, I don't know about your life, Jim, but mine, I get up really early, and before I even start, I've got, I know the phone's going, there's emails there. I just leave the house. I take my dogs, I run them, and I come back, and then I cope with them. So we obviously can do physical activities, eat right, sleep, and that helps. But we can do so much on the subtle energy level that I think it can really make the difference between being able to healthily cope with what's happening versus not. Again, clean the chakras, or let's just say there's an event that comes up and you don't know how to handle it. You get a phone call, like I'm the only one in town who takes care of my mother. I'm it. I'm the only person, the only relative, the only everything.
Yep, I'm right there with you with my dad.
Yeah,
I know exactly
there you go.
Where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm in the sandwich generation. So when I see that she's calling, before I answer, I stop. I breathe deeply. I figure out which chakra is going to need the most support because they're predictive. Science is even showing that your physical body picks up on events. They say 3 seconds before something happens, your body starts to react physically. I think it's way before. So I just go, which chakra am I going to have to be strong in on this phone call? So, if she's going to call me with a shopping list, I usually feel my gut, which has to do with structure and mentality. Mm-hmm. I bring my focus to my gut. I picture yellow. I answer the phone, and I can deal with her shopping list. But I can also put up boundaries like, okay, Mom, this is going to take me 3 days to do this shopping list.
Right.
Right? Because I'm not thrown off. And even post-stress, I've had those 11 p.m. phone calls, your mother is going to ER or this or that or the other thing. Before I do anything, even if I'm on the phone, I'll center, I'll breathe, I'll feel my feet, I'll make sure I'm really present. Which chakra, do I need to manage this situation through? And I either see a color or I feel myself settling in a part of my body, and then I can act from there. And, because we can't predict what we're supposed to do for a situation. I've had those phone calls. Some of those phone calls, I'll just say, I think you guys have it handled. I'll call, ER in the morning. Or I'll say, I will come. So it's a great way to focus ourselves, to get guidance from our internal self, from, I believe there's spiritual guidance, to know how to handle situations.
Now, you kind of intimated your own story. Are there some other stories of people who have used these practices to kind of metamorphosize their life, to change their life in a big way?
Oh, absolutely. I'm thinking of 2, and they're both really different, okay? Years and years ago, I dated a man who loved to golf. And I don't golf. To me, it's a tiny little ball with a tiny stick. There's no way I'm going to hit it. But he introduced me to one of his friends who, in all seriousness, said to me, I really want to win this golf championship. Can you show me how to use my chakras to do golf? So I know that for most of us, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it was to him. He wanted to do chakra golf. So literally I spent about 3 to 4 minutes with him, showing him which chakra to focus on, what would happen if he got stressed, how to bring himself back into balance, how to keep going. And you know what? He won that championship. So, it's all kind of what's important to us. Yet another person I worked with as a young person, about 12 or 13, and this is actually sort of almost a spooky story. He was 12 going on 13. His parents brought him to me because he'd had dreams since he was a little tiny tyke that he was going to die when he turned 13. No kidding. A therapist sent his family. He could tell me the dreams. He could see this accident that was supposedly going to happen. So I brought him into the visualization energy center that's in the brow, and I said, take a look at what you think is programmed. And he looked at it, he played it out, and I said, now open to higher guidance, kind of use other connections that you can make to visualize something different, to visualize a different fork in the road, a different way that you could get through age 13. He did. He had this whole film strip. He was visual already. So you use the gifts you already have. He envisioned a different film strip, everything working out for him. I told his parents to let me know what happened when he turned 14. He did turn 14. The visualization that he created that there was going to be an accident, right? But he was not standing at that street corner. He was on a different one that actually occurred. There was a car accident. There was a car that went into the stop sign, but he was on a different place on that particular street. He just never went near that stop sign that entire year. Sort of proved that there had been some sort of strange predicament that could have taken him out, and he averted it. So that's a very strong story to show that we don't need to be scared of our intuitive faculties, each of which are housed in a different chakra. We can use them. We can work with our chakras to help, get a sense of who we are, to clean energies that aren't useful for us, and to do at least some setting up and establishing of our goals in our lives.
Is it something where you need to contact a professional and work through them first? Is it kind of something you can do a DIY? Is it kind of a mix? How do we go about it?
Oh, I think that's a great question. I believe that we have a lot of power within ourselves, and as often as possible, you become your own chakra expert. You don't need to be a chakra expert for somebody else. Everybody's unusual and different and have their own gifts. And so get to know your chakras, how they work, how you register physical energy versus relational energy versus spiritual energy versus verbal or visual. Become an expert at yourself and have some fun with it too. Just practice it. When you go to the grocery store, just ask yourself to visualize which fruit might be healthy for that week, or kind of where you want to park your car, or this or that or the other thing. I do think it's very helpful to consult somebody else if you feel stuck, if you're scared, if you have an illness that doesn't seem to be leaving. Go to somebody who's got some wherewithal in the field. Know that when you do that, they can only give you the sense through their chakras, through their intuition or healing abilities, that they are able to pick up on. Nobody out there is the oracle, speaks for God. I always caution my clients, I can give you the perspectives I'm able to get. It's sort of like in the 12-step program. When you go to somebody, you want to take what feels right and leave the rest. Because you've got to be the ultimate purveyor of your own, visions, activities, knowledge, and decision maker. But it's really, really helpful to get another point of view. I still go to a therapist who's also really spiritual and intuitive every week or two. And I've been going to therapy since I've been like 19, 20. My needs have changed over time. I'm personally more interested in the spiritual perspectives. I don't mean just psychic. I mean, how does this bring me closer to a sense of oneness? How do I stay like in my good heart? So you can seek out the type of person who could be helpful for you, but always keep that line open. Keep that open to ask for help.
Something here that caught my attention, golden beam protection. What is golden beam protection?
Oh, I know. Isn't that a cool word? I mean, a phrase. There is in the Taoist tradition, amongst others, this idea of something called a hara line. And I'm really talking about that, maybe without naming all those words. And in that tradition, they have something they call dantians instead of chakras, but it's sort of the same idea. And your protection, your ability to stay focused and in flow inside of yourself and be safe within the universe, be connected, kind of to higher guidance, is to image this sort of golden beam coming from above you, from the heavens above you, all the way down, through your body and around your body and all the way down to the center of the earth. This is a really effective tool for enabling yourself to be open intuitively, to be able to be yourself, sense what's happening around you, but know that you are safe. I actually have been teaching that technique and others to a young man who's a soccer player. And he's very ADD, as many sports kids are, loses focus, kind of gets nervous, normal stuff, especially we're in the middle of a game. And this is one of the processes I taught him about how to stay, kind of really safe, not picking up on other people's feelings or issues. Let's say he blows it, right? You don't want to give in to other people's feeling disappointed in you, and he can just stay in the flow and always knows where the ball is, too, as long as he has that beam going through him. So I put that up myself, or I should say I reintegrate that beam of energy when I get up in the morning. If I'm going to do something that I think I might feel shaky doing, something scary, something new, something kind of different, I use that technique as well. And it really is that simple. Just picture a golden beam, going all the way from upward to downward through your body and into the center of the earth. That's sort of it. I love techniques that are easy. Because we're often on the fly. Talk about stress. You don't want to stress yourself out with half-hour meditations. A lot of times you just want things quick and easy, and that's one of those.
What is one of and it could be something that happened in your life or maybe one of your clients. What is the wildest thing that's happened through use of chakras? The most surprising, the one that even you said, wow, this is really powerful.
Okay. Well, I actually have a lot of those stories, which is really fun, actually. I've got a big medicine bag of healing stories that I like to pull out of, but I'll give you one that's recent, all right? 2-3 weeks ago or some such thing, I was working with a woman. I typically work on the phone every so often in person, and I was working with a client who had struggles with her hands for quite a long time. And ever since her sister got sick, her hands have been burning. They hurt. She does, she works with her hands. She can't use them. Medical doctors haven't been able to figure it out. And I said, there's this chakra, now I'm like cheating a little bit, called the 11th chakra. That's like beyond the 7 chakras, but it's an energy center. You can also work with the first, the physical one, to do the same kind of work. That's about commanding energies. This being gives you the ability to command forces and supernatural forces. And I said, when your sister got sick, you turned on your ability to try to command her into wellness, but all you really ended up doing, was running a lot of fire through your hands, so now you're sick. And so we just simply turned off that energy of fire in her hand. We activated her ability to start moving energies around, and on the phone, her hands cleaned and cleared. She was instantly better, and she's remained better. What's interesting is she's now set up to be able to do what a lot of people only do in more indigenous populations, which is literally command weather, command healing in people. I actually taught a technique like this to one of my clients who is a chiropractor, and he suddenly started to be able to heal most of his clients with cancer by waving his hands over them and saying, "Cancer be gone." Now, he said it in his head, right? He didn't say it out loud, but he had that gift of conviction that enabled him to literally turn on and off different conditions like that.
Now, when we deal with medical issues, serious medical issues like that one, I just want to be clear on this, because my personal feeling, there's nothing wrong with bringing in other modalities or maybe non-traditional or maybe more Eastern practices. But to me, it seems like you don't throw away your pills. You don't. You don't.
Never.
Yeah.
No,
I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah. Let's double iterate that as well, because it's all medicine. Whether you're working with physical energy, which is surgery, prescription medicines, or subtle, it's all medicine. And I always tell people, do, what your psychiatrist, your psychologist, your medical doctor says. I'll give you a scary reason. Years ago, I worked with a client, had a small cyst in her breast, and I said, you need to go figure out what that is. She went to her medical allopathic doctor, and then she called back and she said, but I'm not going to get a biopsy. I said, you have to get a biopsy. I can't work with you unless you get a biopsy.
Right.
You must treat this. It's a cyst. You can remove it, even if it's malignant, right? You remove it and you can recover. And I hate to say it, but the end of that story is 4 years later she died because she would not use allopathic treatment. I have story after story like that, where something can get taken care of more easily, simply through the medical world, but people get negative or paranoid about that type of medicine. I'll tell you, holistic medicine is holistic. It includes surgery. It includes setting a broken leg. It includes prescription meds. It includes going to ER. It includes everything. And there is a reason they call energy medicine, like chakra medicine, supplemental. It is not primary.
Well, it's really interesting because we've done programs on the other side. I interviewed a physician not that long ago on one of the programs, and this guy is out of Central Casting. He looks like the kindly family doctor, probably in his 60s, and looks like a guy that you could trust to the nth degree. I mean, again, like Central Casting. And he did a book about physicians' untold stories of the supernatural. And he didn't throw away his medical degree, but he said sometimes miracles happen. Now, some of the miracles were more kind of ghostly and near-death experience and those kind of things, and other things were kind of healing stories where people shouldn't have recovered, but they did. So I agree with you. I mean, to me, if you take traditional medicine and you layer on top of it some of these other modalities, I don't see, as long as somebody's not saying throw away your pills or don't take your chemotherapy or something like that, as long as somebody's not saying that to you and say we can use this as an add-on, I don't see any downside to it.
Absolutely. And I don't think any physician would if there's a question, because, for instance, kind of in the bailiwick of holistic medicine, you have herbs, you have supplements. Some of those are really kind of not very good if you're taking prescription meds, or if you're going to go into surgery, there's certain herbs that you can't use. So you do have to be careful, even with some of those simple holistic procedures, if you're working with traditional medicine as well, to make sure that you're not hurting Peter while you're helping Paul as well.
At the risk of sounding like a lawyer, always consult a trusted physician.
Yes, yes.
Now,
but you should.
Yes, I agree. Cyndi, so of course people should pick up the book, but how can they dip a toe into the water? I mean, how do you start?
Little Book of Chakras is a great little book, but the last book that came out was a 1,200-page book of chakras. Just to tell people you can go little or big, so I'd start little. I do have a 1,200-page book called The Complete Book of Chakras, and I'm not sure anything could get more complete. Get that book or go on the internet. There's lots and lots of sites that will explain chakras to you. There's visuals where you can just download a really simple picture of where the chakras are, what they are, what colors and what they represent. Carry that around with you, kind of like a cheat sheet. See somebody, take a class. Almost in any area of the United States right now, there's chakra classes or intuitive classes or Reiki or Healing Touch program classes. I love Healing Touch program. So it depends on what your interest is, but just kind of put yourself out there and see what's of interest to you.
Well, it sounds like good advice. Cyndi, where can people find the book and more information about everything you do?
All my books are on Amazon, so just plug in Cyndi Dale. It's spelled Cyndi, and then Dale. My website is cindydale.com. I have classes that I teach. Some of my books are on the website. I mean, I'm too a fan of the small bookstores, but the truth is Amazon has everything. So you can have it delivered to your door. Just fortunately, they're not doing drones yet. So they're not going to drop my 1,200-page book on your head.
Yeah, that could be maybe the drone would have difficulty lifting that one. I
think so.
Our guest has been Cyndi Dale. The book is Llewellyn's Little Book of Chakras, along with her other books. Cyndi, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed this edition of the Paranormal Podcast as much as I did. I hope you're having a happy and healthy holiday season. And I hope that if you're on Apple devices, you will subscribe to the Paranormal Podcast. And that's right on your iPhone or on your iPad. that app comes right on there. It's a little purple app with a little guy standing there. That's your podcast app. Just go in there, search for Paranormal Podcast, the one hosted by Jim Harold. I think I am the only paranormal podcast. It's just the Paranormal Podcast because I was first after all. And going back to 2005. But anyhow, just hit subscribe. That helps us immensely. That raises us up in the charts. And when we raise up in the charts, more people find us and more people listen. And that helps us continue the program. So it's all a very virtuous cycle, but only if we have your help. And I know that we will. So please go in there today and do that. And actually now, if you're not driving or doing something dangerous, is a really good time to do that at the end of the podcast. Stop the podcast and just go ahead and do that. We'd appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you on the Paranormal Podcast, and have a great week, everybody, and happy holidays. Bye-bye.
Now for the legal disclaimer. We do not accept money from publishers or content producers in exchange for interviews. However, as with most media outlets, in the majority of cases, we do receive complimentary copies of books and DVDs that we feature on our podcasts. Your purchases of books, DVDs, and other items via our Amazon.com links benefit Jim Harold and JimHarold.com and help us continue our programming. The sponsor messages you hear on the programs are paid endorsements, although we really do like them. For the full disclaimer, go to JimHarold.com, and thanks for listening.